Hello and welcome back. In this short lecture, we will be learning about privileged identity management. In short, we also call as PIM. And to work with privileged identity management, we need to have Azure Premium 2 license. That's a key. And let's understand about what exactly this privileged identity management is as an overview within this lecture. Privileged identity management is a service within Microsoft Azure, which comes from your Azure Active Directory, where you can enable the service to monitor and manage and grant the access for important resources within your organization, so that these resources, let's say, these resources can be your Azure Active Directory or Azure services or like a PaaS enabled services or Microsoft online services like Office 365, SharePoint or Intune, all that it can be. So what we can do is apply the uh, we can apply a different roles against, let's say, Exchange admin is trying to perform some action on Office 365. So what you can do is you can apply privileged identity management. So in general, for Exchange admin, he will be having a role as the permanent, but when you come back to the privileged identity management, when exactly it is required this access, then we will be granting the access within that required scheduled change management time, maybe, or maybe he wants to run some kind of task, so we would be granting during that time only, and it is completely fully automated. So the end user, as the Exchange admin, he will never have full rights. So there's no concept of permanent here, so you don't have the permanent access. Instead, on demand, when you need the access as an Exchange admin or maybe a SharePoint admin or maybe a backup contributor or website contributor or maybe a global admin activity to be performed within your Microsoft Azure cloud, or maybe a security admin or Intune admin for that matter. So you would be raising a request that goes for an approval process, and based on the business justification, once it is approved, it will be granted access for you within that given time frame window. So when you raise a request, you will have to provide the time frame when you want to perform this specific change and why you're performing all this change, and then this information will be get notified with other privileged identity management resources, so that, or the global admins, let's say, so that they know that what kind of change you are actually performing here, and that way you would be knowing what kind of change you are performing, and they knows that, hey, this activity is going on. So the idea for this privileged identity management is you will never be granting a permanent access for your resources. You can make users as eligible. I'll be talking about eligible kind of a word. There are different terms that needs to be understand, but for now, eligible means we are, instead of making a permanent, we are making them as the eligible resource or eligible users, so that they can apply for the privileged access, and then it would be, system will be granted the access. And with the help of privileged identity management, you can uh, grant the access just in time, or in short, JIT. So you can define a time frame for which the users will get access. uh, that kind of access can be automatically granted, so that if you're trying to perform an action on a specific VM, so you get that just in time specific time frame window, and users can perform their required activities. You will also get some notifications. Let's say user one has requested for privileged identity management access for within a time frame, and he is performing some change. As explained earlier, you also get the notification. When I say you, other users, other global admins also get know that what is happening, and they monitor what kind of permissions or what kind of activities you are performing, so that you know that what is the importance of this. So why do we need to use privileged identity management. Let's understand the reason behind. So these days organizations want to minimize the number of people who has access to secure information or maybe resources, because that reduces the challenge of malicious actor getting that access, or an authorized user inadvertently impacting a sensitive resource. However, users still need to carry out privileged operations in Azure AD or maybe Azure Services or Office 365 or software as a service or applications, or maybe uh, SharePoint Portal or Intune. So organizations can give users just-in-time privileged access to Azure resources or Azure Active Directory, uh, so that so there is a need of oversight uh, for what those users are doing with their administrative privileges. Instead of you grant as a permanent, you are making them as eligible, so that you can easily monitor all the activities that our users are performing. Let's say, let's take one other example. You have Office 365 or maybe Microsoft Azure or maybe Active Directory. So you may have Exchange admin, as we talked, or maybe backup contributor or global admin. So what we are trying to do is, here as a summary kind of thing, users will always have a permanent access to resources when we look at not in a PIM case. So these exchange admins always have a permanent access. But if you enable the PIM, users will always they never have the full permissions, right? They can we can make them as the eligible, and then they can request. So the possibilities for the why we are all doing this is, if you look at if you have maybe more than one exchange admin or maybe backup contributors, you will end up one day with stale entries, um, where those users might have a higher privileged access. So that's a risk for us. Uh, so other admins never notified what they are trying to do, or what kind of actions or what kind of changes they are doing within the environment. So that's the biggest concern for any of the organization. So to address that, now privileged identity management can help you out. So if you want to learn more, let's understand more about what does actually it does. It actually provides a just-in-time privileged access for your Azure Active Directory or Azure resources, and also this access is completely time bound. Uh, so when I say time bound, it is within that specific time only the access will be granted against to those resources or maybe against to the Azure AD. So they can start and uh, they can end within that time frame only. Of course, they can request for the extend, and based on the approvals, it can go further. And also you can enforce with the help of multi-factor authentication. You can enforce another layer of security for the admin roles or whoever trying to perform privileged identity management. So it's not that you are already logged in, and when you're requested for a privileged identity management, then it will trigger one more layer of authentication for the user challenging to prove that hey, he is the multi-factor authentication to be approved, so that he is the actual user who's going to perform that specific activity. And so users always have a justification to understand why users are active, and that needs to be filled. Also, other users also gets the notification when privileged access roles are activated. So again, here activate or activated, these are other terms which I'm going to talk in a minute or so, but just to explain, as these are more familiar, so you get the notifications uh, for the privileged roles when they are activate or activated, and conduct access reviews to ensure the users will still have any of the needs of the roles. You can connect when it comes to the planning side. You can do that, and also you can download complete audit history for the internal or external purpose, so that you are more compliant whatever we are trying to do. So let's understand more about the scenarios where we can use this. So the first one would be the privileged role administrator permission. So when you enable this, so you have the approval for a specific roles, and the specific approver users or user group to be approved based on the request, and you can view the request and approve based on the history for those all privileged roles. Also, there is another permission called approver permission. So when we talk about the approver permission, so what he's going to do is he can view pending all approvals like a request, and he can approve or reject even for a role elevation. It can be singular bulk request can be performed. Also, he can prove justification for his approvals or rejection. So this is very useful in other terms, like if you are the approver permissions, if you have that, the user approval permission will be approving that. So you can integrate within your ITIL service management so that it makes more sense. So they would be performing within that change window time all these approvals, and it can even export. And let's also talk about the eligible role user permission. So we can request activation of a role that requires some kind of approval, so that you can view the status and request to activate, complete your task and within the Microsoft Azure AD if really activation was approved. So now let's also talk about the terminology side. So we do have within the privileged identity management some other words. So these are the 11 different terms that we use it within privileged identity management. So the first one being said eligible and active. So these are the two related to the role assignment. When we talk about the eligible is a role assignment that requires a user to perform an action or more than one action in order to use this role. And if I have been made eligible for a role, for example, as the global administrator, I can activate that role. Here, if you see here, that's another word, activate that role when I need to perform the privileged task. But I need to know, perhaps provide some kind of justification, so I can give why I need to access with some kind of ticket number to be punched in, or maybe verify my identity with multi-factor authentication. So there's no difference in access given to someone with a permanent versus an eligible role assignment. So we did talk about the permanent role assignment also earlier, so there's no much difference. The only difference is that eligible people don't need access all the time, so they are ready, so they don't need to have full access all the time. So that's a major difference between permanent resources who have the access versus eligible. Now let's have a look on active. Active is other type of the role assignment. Active is a role assignment that doesn't require a user to perform an action to use the role. If I have an active role assignment that I am a member of a global administrator or maybe a security administrator, I have a privileged assigned to the role. That means I have the privileges to perform some kind of role. When we talked about the eligible, we said that the user would need to perform one or more actions in order to use the role. That is called activating the role. The purpose here is the active is the process of performing one or more actions to use the role that they are eligible for it. So the other two, activated assignment, is it means that you are an eligible role for an assignment, so you can perform some kind of activities as a role and you're now active. So that means you're activated and you're assigned simply you are ready to perform some kind of an active role. So the difference between the two of these, activated means I can use a role for pre-configured period of time before I need to be activate again. And whereas the assigned means here, uh, I have it all the time. So I have all the time this kind of access. The next four, which is the permanent, eligible, and also the permanent active, expire eligible, and expire active. So out of this, the permanent eligible is the known as the role for assignment based on the duration. So these four are based on the duration where you can assign. So the first one would be the permanent eligible means that I'm always eligible to activate a certain role. I always have ability to increase my access. Now I may still need to perform one or more steps too in order to do, but I always have the ability to do it. That's called permanent eligible. Now when we look at permanent active means you're always a member, you will always be a member even. So whereas the expire eligible and expire active are just the opposite side, one with each of them. Expire eligible means I have a window time within that I can either I can use it or I can activate that role. At the end of that window I cannot no longer do anything. Whereas the expire active means I can use the role within a given time of period. And the final two are just in time access and the principle of least privileged access. So JIT is which is the model of what we are trying to attempting to use by implementing PIM. With the temporary permissions to use a privileged tasks. And the principle there's a principle of least privileged access is we have used so many times, like there's a least permissions where we start and perform any kind of task or the job where we start doing it. Like example, if we take it like a VM, you want to grant a permission, so you might give as a contributor permissions for that VM so that he can work on that specific VM settings. So that kind of access on those resources you can give it. Even for the website, you can give as a website contributor role so that it doesn't need more licensing. At the same time, you are giving explicitly permissions for that specific object. That's all about these different terms that we use within the PIM. Now let's have a look on Azure AD Privileged Identity Console. This is the blade within Microsoft Azure where you have the privileged identity where you can assign and you can activate that specific roles if you are the user, and then if you are the approver you can approve it. All that goes to under tasks and you can review, approve, all that, and also you can check the alerts and you can run the wizard if you want to manage. This is how you're gonna do with a quick start. Now let's have a look on one of the dashboard, how it looks like. So this is a dashboard from the last 7 days activities that are performed within the privileged identity management. If you see here, these are the eligible activities for the 148 members, and the permanent active assignments are completely reduced, and time-based activity assignments also lesser portion. So you can configure even for the group specific, so that also you can check out. So this is a dashboard, nice dashboard, where you can have a view of what kind of changes are going within your organization. Now let's plan about how best you can actually uh, deploy it. Before we just deploy it, you can think about what roles you cannot assign actually. So if you're planning anything to assign account administrator or service administrator or co-administrator, by the way, these three are from classic subscription based. So if you are talking about the classic subscription administrator roles, then these roles you cannot manage with privileged identity management. Let's also think about how best you can design and deploy for your organizations. So coming back to the designing, there is a path which Microsoft always recommends to go with a 4-stage model. The stage one is the immediate, where the stage one where you need to take the critical items that once you start running the wizard or the configuration for the privileged identity management, it will you need to address the critical items that Microsoft recommends to achieve these complete privileged identity management solution to implement within your organization. It's not just a one click, because a lot of problems might come, because all these days you granted the permission as the permanent. Now you're asking them to go for a different process where we are granting for only on a time base. So definitely we need to go for a planned mechanism like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, which is a 3 months, and stage 4 is the last one. So stage 1, in that period you would be addressing immediately within 2 days timeline all the actions, for example global admin specific, enabling multi-factor authentication, and reducing the global admins, and granting only identifying the required resource as the eligible. All that will be done within the 24 hours. And stage 2, mitigate the most frequently used attack techniques, and also the stage 3 for the build visibility and build for control and admin activities, and stage 4, 6 months and beyond, where you would be continuously building the defense to further harden of your security. Just to conclude what we have learned so far, with the privileged identity management is you can enable just in time, so that when we need it, we can grant that specific permissions instead of granting the permanent as the roles to be assigned. Instead of that, we can assign as just in time, and that will include the time bond, and you can go for approval and multi-factor authentication. Justification can be attached like a ticket number or such information. Also you would be get notified with other admins, and you can conduct the access reviews with the help of planning fees, and also you get all the audit reports with the history. So you can configure all these configurations with the help of privileged identity management. I hope this is useful for you. Thank you for watching this. Stay tuned for the next demo on privileged identity management.